Dear colleagues, friends, well, from the very outset, I would like to offer our apologies for the fact that it happens this way, that not all of the participants are able to take seats, because during the last week we received a lot of requests for participation in the forum. We are, of course, happy, but on the other hand, we feel awkward that not all of you are comfortable in the room. We will definitely take care of that. But I would like also to add another thing. What is likely to take place here is, of course, very important. But what is also important for us, and we intend to do that, we made an emphasis on, say, arranging the business of the conference in such a way that many conferences, and today we have a lunar eclipse. This is a very interesting phenomenon, because my friendly astrologist told me that today you should behave very responsibly, because whatever you say during this day is for serious and for a long time. So I call upon you to be substantive in your presentations and offer good recommendations. From the bottom of heart, I am pleased to welcome you at this forum, and I would like to believe that we will we devote these 2 days to very productive work. The situation in this country is great, but not hopeless. I call upon my friend to continue. Good morning, dear friends. I would like to remind you about the situation which we are right. We seeing a gap between the great potential which we have in this country, great potential wealth, and the situation, indeed, which our economy finds itself in. And here we have the pleasure of the scientists, industrialists, the wide spectrum of representative of our society is here, and I do believe that our result of our 3 years' work is such that 65% of the population of the country want changes in their life. They see great potential, and they are desirous that changes should take place, and so the country should march forward along the path of progress. And I think this is also partially part of our efforts. And our task for these 2 days is to give a new impetus to this movement, to articulate this desire in clear statements, in clear, say, action plans. So we should decide and say what we should do in order for those changes to be effected in a proper, steady, and responsible way, so that our country should take the position in the world which it deserves. May I also tell you something? 3,083 registered participants of this of this forum. I'm also sorry to see that not all of you are comfortable in this room, in this hall. But what is taking place in this hall is great, but this is not the only part of the forum. As you may know, in various rooms we'll have about 900 presentations scattered in various rooms, and that will be more specific. And I think that all of you will be quite comfortable in other sectoral meetings, in round tables, and you'll be comfortable. So we have representatives 47 regions of Russia, 16 countries, and we have the pleasure of the company of 205 media members of the press. Well, the interest to the forum is great, so I call upon you to be responsible, because whatever you're likely to say, it will be aired and broadcast, and they, at the end of the day, are likely to result in specific results. Thank you. I wish every success to the forum. And now we'll commence our work, practical work. Well, there is a broadcasting in the rooms. We invite to the stage the following members of the conference. Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Не слышу. Я не слышу, нет текста. О, пошло. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund from 2007 to 2011. Sergey Arbuzov, Chairman, Research Center for Economic, Social, and Cultural Development of the CIS, Central and Eastern Europe. Alexander Auzan, Dean, Department of Economics of the Moscow State University. Yuri Boldyrev, member, Editorial Board of the Russian business magazine, Economist, and writer. Vladislav Zhukovsky, economist, exchange expert. Grzegorz Kolodko, professor, Kozminsky University, former Minister of Finance of Poland and Deputy Prime Minister of Poland between 1994, 1997, and 22 and 2003. Alexander Nekipelov, Academician, Russian Academy of Sciences, Director, Moscow School of Economics of Moscow, the Moscow State University. Dear friends, we are commencing our first plenary session devoted to the 25th of our great transformation. There is no irony in my voice. Our transformation, by our transformation, I mean the entire 330 odd countries of the former socialist team. Recently, I saw a poll of the public opinion, results of public opinion poll of various cross-section of the society who are engaged in this. And I was terrified with the numbers which I saw there. More than 50% of the respondents spoke in favor of return to planned economy and distribution economic. Only 27% are in favor of a market-based economy. This does not give us too many reasons for optimism. What we wanted to achieve 25 years ago, what the results we have, who is to be blamed, but what actually did we entertain any harbor illusions there? And is it possible to correct the situation? At the second plenary session, we will address the issues of what should be done. This session will speak about what we wanted to achieve, what we managed to achieve, and what we failed to achieve. I have great speakers at my side at the first plenary session, and I'm very happy that they have made it to this room, and I would like to give the floor to the Dean of the Department of Economics at the Moscow State University, Alexander Auzan. This is his first debut at our forum, and I would like to offer my felicitations and gratitude, express my gratitude to the Moscow State University for providing these facilities for us. Perhaps next year we'll have more participants, and in this perhaps next year we'll have another conference hall, the major conference hall at the Moscow University, which can house more participants. So I invite all of the speakers to speak for 5 minutes, which should not be more than 5 minutes, and I emphasize this. Alexander, you have the floor, Alexander. Good morning. This is an honor for me to open the discussion at the Moscow Economic Forum, and I will try to be very brief and up to the point, offering my opinion of the transformation which occurred over the last 25 years. I will speak about the Soviet Union and Russia, while other countries, perhaps my colleague Grzegorz Kolodko may be kind enough to speak about Poland. Speaking about the assessment of the results depends on what the starting point, how we understand what was our starting point. Let us imagine the Soviet Union at the moment of its highest success. This is the beginning of the 60s, I believe, when we were the leaders in the space exploration. The shale technologies were invited in Russia at that point of time. We were leaders in the scientific development. We were socially attractive country of the world. So we movies, and at the same time, the country was plagued with economy of deficit, and that was the contradiction which actually resulted in the so-called transit trend. Let me propose a hypothesis that transformation was not to the market systems, but from the economy of deficit to the economy of the consumption society of consumption, and this is the transition. And was unseen in the history in the world, from the economy of deficit to the situation when the society was bursting with the consumption. And this transition was successful. It was over by the year 2008, and it had certain phases through which it went through. Indeed, initially, we wanted that the market will regulate everything and we have effective owners. Theoretically, it was unsound expectation, because even at that point in time, they didn't take into part the transaction expenses when there were, say, conflicting forces in uneven distribution of wealth. There cannot be and could not be automatic balance in the society and automatic victory of the effectiveness. So in the absence of the institutions which would reduce the transactional expenses, we failed. Well, we started to look at the second phase institutions, but imported institutions were not planted in Russian soil well for a long time. We tried to introduce the, say, a law on bankruptcy, but then we started to fight against it. So this gives offer you second hypothesis. We have institutions in this country which are quite perfect, but in a certain phase. Those are extra active institutions. So when they say, let us perfect institutions which we have, I'm afraid if we perfect those institutions, we'll get even a greater, say, situation when the rent will be extracted of all kinds. And the third hypothesis, the society of consumption based on the extractive institutions, which are not conducive for development, is, of course, a dead end from which we should find a way out. The squares of the oppositions, and in 2014, when there were changes in the authorities, we were searching for the next way. The way to the future was we all understand that our country was great, had great, say, targets, and we were leaders in many areas of human endeavors. Is it not possible, while addressing the issue of feeding the people, return to the people of long-term development goals? And I think this is the main crossing of the roads where we're at the moment. And this is the something which we're trying to change the trajectory of our development, try to get out of the trap of extra active institutions. It is an attempt, while completing the issue of the transition to the society of consumption, open the way for the new phase in our development. Thank you, Alexander. You have displayed a very good sense of timing, and I really appreciate not only in timing but in the substance of what you wanted to say. And let me tell you something. It happens so that Alexander Auzan, you all know that he's a very brilliant economist, and the institution which he mentioned to define shape the way we live, and it's important to emphasize that, to the best of my knowledge, he has been made responsible to lead a huge collective of the experts who would be preparing a concept of our long-term development. And in this sense, I am pleased to tell you that we have the very short way to channelize through him our recommendations to the authorities. Let me say more specifically, based on the instruction of the government, I was the leader of the working group which offered new ways of development. So we proposed that let us define where we want to go, and we should be, let us combine economic strategy with the economic of national security, with the cultural strategy. Those were proposals which were made available to the Prime Minister, but so far no decisions have been taken, and we are continuing to work in the format, in the existing formats. So it's now a time for Grzegorz Kolodko.
He is a famous politician and economist, and it is a unique situation when an intellectual comes to power and improves policy and not making it worse, which often happens. Poland, in our rating of successes and failures, occupies first place, honorary first place. And I'd like to mention a couple of words here before he enters into this dialogue, what he thinks about this transformation. I believe that Poland achieved brilliant results. And in my cautious assessment to the changes, be that liberalization or privatization and political system, I continue to reiterate that the political system ensured the change of power capacity at the time what it was supposed to change. And today, the general trend in the global situation when executive power dominates over other branches of power, and we see unbalanced state. Those balances and checks disappear, and it looks like Poland is suffering because of this situation in the last 2 years, and perhaps I might exaggerate this situation. Grzegorz, you got 5 minutes for your presentation. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me here. I am also very happy to be here in Moscow. You have just mentioned that from where we started and which point we have achieved. I believe you don't know that what happened 25 years ago, but we do not know where we are heading for. And from the very beginning, since the time of 1989, we are moving to market economy in terms of institutional framework as they were set in the European Union. There were certain errors and successes during the shock therapy in the 90s, recession set in, and in the 90s we experienced stagnation, and there was also a fluctuation in the economic cycle, and we continue to live in this triangle. One top is values, and we still see a fight between liberal and social values, and now we've been in transformation for 27 years, and I participated in the round tables since that time. So we also have a kind of liberal and kind of social trend. But the second point or corner of this triangle are institutions. Institutions are important element when we took those institutions from the best schemes like Switzerland, let's say, and it didn't work because those values and the policy wasn't there to support these things. And suppose if a policy would be moved to Switzerland from Russia, will it work successfully? Of course not. And a lot depends on the policy because economy and market institutions, but this is also policy. And I think in 100 or 200 years, again, certain problems will continue to exist. And 25 years ago, when the Soviet Union was destroyed, the GDP was 3 times more than in China. And within the framework of one generation, Eltsin replaced by Putin now, the GDP in China is 6 times more than the GDP in Russia. So Chinese, from the very beginning, they knew the direction which they followed. And of course, they are not moving towards European Union or any other regional unions. Look at Poland and Ukraine. 25 years ago, Ukraine was number 2 big economy in the Soviet Union. And per capita, the GDP was bigger than in Poland. Now, in Poland, it is 3 or 4 times more per capita than in Ukraine. And the values, the institutions, the policy doesn't work. And there is no long-term plan. We have heard from Ruslan that 52% of people they support new economy. We don't need new economy. We need some kind of a strategic thoughts. What I need strategy for Poland. And we developed a strategy, a complex, a comprehensive program. And we are now in Lomonosov University, but the policy and strategy of economic development was based on a very good economic theory, really, which was executed in Poland and China. This is new pragmatism, and I'm very happy that this book was published here, 25 years of transformation. This is advertising. You have to pay for it. This is not advertising. Those people who, excuse me, your time is over and thank you very much. Dear friends, today we have Dominique Strauss-Kahn, the man who doesn't need to be introduced, the man who was in charge of an International Monetary Fund, one of the most hated in the world body which obstructs and prevents the rest of the world's economic development. I know that Dominique Strauss-Kahn is a man of tremendous wit with broad knowledge, and I'm really pleased that our understanding of the world of socialist democratic orientation matches. And I would like to ask a question. 25 years ago, we hoped that the Western institutions and International Monetary Fund will help us. We thought that we will get real powerful help, and we will be on the sunny side of life, and some deteriorated their status. And how do you assess the position of the West at that time, and what the West thought about what's happening at our part of the planet, why this help was not provided? And we counted that in the 90s, in the beginning of 2000s, the exports per $1 which came to Russia, we exported $3 to the West to help the West. Or maybe I'm exaggerating. Please, you have 5 minutes, and this is the first round, and there will be questions coming from the public.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I first have to apologize not being able to address the audience in the Russian language, but I'm afraid I really can't do that. And I would like to thank Professor Grinberg for inviting me to this forum. So, in a nutshell, my view is that we have no other way to have economy functioning than the market economy, even if this market economy has a lot of drawbacks. And the problem is, how are we able to correct the drawbacks? And we haven't been so able to do it. We have been underestimating the drawbacks, especially the way market economy creates inequalities within a country, among countries. And the most recent big crisis, 2008, 2009, 2010, with still consequences today, has its roots in this increase in world inequality. Why is it so? Because economic theory is not really physics, as economists do believe. And so economic theory gives us some information, some lessons, some way to look at the reality, but the reality is much more complex than that. And when in the post-Soviet period, the West, including the IMF, but I may answer a question about the IMF later on, tried to help the transformation of the post-Soviet economies here in Russia and some other countries towards a market economy, they just try to do something they don't understand, nor do I. We don't really understand how it works. And it's just an illusion to believe that we understand clearly the rule and the way it works. Why? Mostly because economy is not just like physics, it is something which includes human beings, culture, history. And you cannot just take a policy or institution. Institution works, matters. Policy works and matters, but that's not enough. You cannot just take a policy or an institution that did well in some part of the world and decided to put it in the same way in another part of the world, with another history, another culture, another way to organize its life. You have to adapt it, and this adaptation may be even bigger than the institution itself. As a result of that, the attempt of the Europeans, the Americans, let's say the Westerners, to create here in Russia and some other country the same kind, exactly the same kind of mechanism that the one they were used to, was, I guess, one of the main causes of the failure. Now, many people do understand that, and that means that each and every country has to find its own way of development, which has common rules, but also many, many differences. And that's why institutions like the IMF, for instance, who have only one view, are just unable to work well if they don't take into account the specificity, the particularity of each country and characteristic. You won't have here in Russia for a long time the same kind of economy that we have in France. Same for Brazil, same for China. Comparisons are useful. You can learn from the comparison, but you cannot just do exactly the same thing in this different part of the world. Here, you suffer clearly from an economy which is based on largely based on natural resources, and after the collapse of growth during the 90s and the spectacular growth since 99, 2000, now the problem is directly led to this question of relying on natural resources, especially oil and gas. So you need specific strategy which have nothing to do, even if it's a market economy. Market economy 1 and market economy 2 are very different. This one needs a specific strategy which has little to do with the economic strategy you may use in the US, in Brazil, in Africa, in Europe, wherever. And that's why institutions need to adapt. That's what I tried to do in the IMF, with some success and some failure. And there's no way
Dominique,
that we could give advice.
I'm terribly sorry, but you have
last sentence, as I was saying, that there's no
have
way.
Opportunity to
Okay,
speak again.
I'll come back.
To speak again. That we are struggling for equality here. Уважаемые коллеги, я сейчас предоставлю слово.
Colleagues, I would like to give the floor to the Vice Chairman of Ukraine prior to Maidan period, to the Prime Minister. And this is a very important topic for us, Ukraine, and a big pain for us. And I'd like to ask a simple question to my friend and colleague, to Sergey Arbuzov. Grzegorz Kolodko just reiterated that in the end of 1980s, the life standards in Poland and Ukraine were almost the same. And now we see a dramatic contrast. Why it so happened? Please, you got 5 minutes for your comments. Thank you very much. For me, it's a great honor to respond to this question. I think it's a historical moment when, after 25 years, and on the basis of facts, to summarize what happened, Ukraine, in the same way as Russia, had tremendous potential for development of free market economy if it hadn't been for failure to execute those plans. Ukraine started its move in the free market economy, received its sovereignty, and actually it was very tightly related with a big state, and the starting point was fairly difficult to separate from the Soviet Union with tremendous potential, and for 1991 were the best numbers for the economy of 70%. As compared with 1991, we have only 70%. The harvest now is only at the level of 1991, and we failed to accomplish our move towards the market economy. There were changes in their priorities, and Ukraine was actually subsidized at it, and 80% were receiving supplies from the Union republics of the former Soviet Unions. And we wanted to maintain the best features of what happened in the Soviet Union. And the miracle didn't happen when we moved to the market. And the question which was placed, Ukraine failed to successfully move towards market economy. As far as the last 2 years, in 2 last years, Ukraine lost even more than during the 20 years of independence, a dramatic change of the economic formation, and the desire to move towards Western values brought to the loss of ties with Russia, and we lost more than $10 billion. And now Ukraine is trying to borrow this amount of money from International Monetary Fund, and today, these are very stringent requirements which are offered by the IMF, and Ukraine being an independent state. So during the last 2 years, our numbers went down, minus 15%, inflation 40%, impoverishment of the population, with a salary of less than $50 per month, very low pension supply, and Ukraine is becoming more and more dependent on the money received from the international institutions. We lost all the ties, and the only way out is just moving back, and that could put us to the period of 1991. And in my opinion, the situation could be improved. However, it's very difficult, for we've been dragged behind for dozens of years. Thank you very much. It's a very sad story, and I hope that you will say something optimistic in the second round of our discussion. And now I would like to give the floor to Academician Nekipelov, director of the Moscow School of Economics. We worked together with him for a lot of time, and by virtue of destiny, we were offered a job to deal with the economy of post-Soviet period in many countries, and we advised Mr. Gorbachev how to move towards market economy. And I remember that Alexander Nekipelov fought for the principle of regressive protectionism. And the idea was, if we start immediately the market reforms, we will have the tendency of making our economy primitive, because the market is short-sighted and looks for quick money. And if we discontinue the regulatory functions, and we wrote our reviews and reports, and it was a very simple idea. We enter the market. I'm telling this story, but not at the expense of your time. And we will live in new reality. We will not only produce, but also sell. And because those who buy, they dominate in the world.
You produce coats, for example. They're not of good quality, but we give you 5 years to adjust to the new economic conditions. So we say we will introduce custom duties 100%, then we'll be reducing gradually them down to the 0 level. And as one wiser friend told me, if you doesn't fail, if you fail, then this is your destiny. And but the authorities did not listen to us, and they told us that those were the Soviet legacy. We do not need that. We need market. Alexander, you have the floor. Thank you, Ruslan, dear colleagues. And I have been thinking a lot, very hard recently about the correlation of two factors which define the process of transformation, radical reforms in our country. The first factor, level of our knowledge at the beginning of the reform process, and the second factor, which gradually began to play a predominant role, is the factor of forming new interests which guided and shaped the development of the economy in a certain way. So speaking about the knowledge which we had today, perhaps we are in a position to say that our perception about the nature of the process of transition to market economy were sufficiently primitive. we placed great emphasis on the process of liberalization of the economic life in the country. And at the same time, we did not understand the importance of formation of agents adequate to the market economy conditions. So roughly speaking, we had, and throughout the 90s, we were in a situation, amazing situation, when we, to a great extent, liberalized our entire economic life, but that was as if we say you place street lights, but all the participants are all drivers are colorblind, and as a result, well, the economy was functioning in a very strange way. For many years, we were, hostages of non-payment. The standard methods of economic policy resulted in situations which was different from what was expected. Many of you would remember, of course, that we used to say a lot about balancing the budget when the expenses were cut, but despite all expectations, despite all what our textbooks would say was the growth of the deficit of the state budget. So we did not understand the importance of creating our economic subjects with market motivation. Ruslan Grinberg said that we failed to understand the essence of the issue, that we were in an economy with a different relocation of resources, and when we're launching a market mechanism, the structure was bound to be broken. So that was the origin of our proposals to soften this process. We can see that everything within a flat concept of shock, therapy. But indeed, if we were to come back to that point in time, our objective would have been a different one. The shock solution of the problem of formation of the market subject with the market orientation and gradual approach to launching mechanism of market economy into the resource-based economy. So that was the error for which we paid very dearly. We lost the bulk of our high-tech production facilities. But there was another consequence, which I would like to highlight right now, which the results of which we feel right now. What I mean, have in mind, we decided that the transformation would go in a shock way at any cost, no matter what it may cost. The very process of transformation conducted in a conflict environment. It was accompanied by a great deal of conflicts. Population went poor, and many contradictions were the order of the day. And that very fact affected the status of our political system in this particular sphere. If we decided to conduct the reform in this way, we should have enhanced the authoritative trends in our life of our country. And that is something which we see today as well. The consequences, as a matter of fact, we have a discussion about the economic policy going on, but irrespective of this discussion, we see the government, so-called government of professionals for the last 25 years, which operates without paying any attention to what other economists would say. Thank you. Dear colleagues, the next speaker is Yuri Boldyrev. He is a very known man, does not need any introduction. I want to ask him a question, provocative question. At one point in time, there was a political party which was known as an Apple, a Russian political party, and Yuri contributed a lot in formation of this Apple, political party. But as I believe, and he may correct me if I'm wrong, in the process of the evolution of the country and his own evolution, he reviewed some of his initial views on the political life, on the economy, and I would like, we often meet and we argue a lot. We do not agree on a number of points. I do believe that he is overly serious towards national interests, but I believe that we should also take into account interests of our neighbors and try to negotiate with them. Maybe I'm wrong, Yuri. We do still have some time, have enough time rather, after the first round. But now I would like to ask you a specific direct questions. Did you harbor any illusion at that point in time, or did you believe that you were absolutely right at that point in time and you don't want to change any of your views right now? The first. Well, I do not have any, say, relations to the political party Apple. Second statement. Too serious attitude to the national interest is something which cannot be there. Well, there should be an insufficiently serious attitude towards national interest. But this is my second statement. My third statement, dear colleagues and friends and comrades. Well, I can tell you that I am the only person in this room who really worked in the Russian authorities, in the government. I was a participant of the process, and I had to be a witness speaking about those events. I was a member of the Congress of the People's Deputy of the Soviet Union. I was a member of the Consultative Council to President Yeltsin. I was a head of the Control Department till March 1993. And then I was a member of the first Federation of Councils, one of the founders and the creators of the controlling chamber of the Russian Federation. So I have never been. Well, I was became an opponent of Yeltsin while I was still at the government position. Why it happened so? We had now a program, a forum dedicated to the results of the market-oriented reforms. In China, they also had market reforms, but they were different types. In Poland, they also had market reforms, but they were different from ours. So that means that there's something different. Modern market reforms were replaced in our country with something else. With what? Let us look at that. In a civilized understanding of the market economies is the switching on of market mechanism to enhance the effectiveness of the national economy. This is are you in agreement with me? And not with aiming to say convert the big ship, battleship, into a small boat navigating the sea at the mercy of the waves. There is a funny story about that. In one boat there is Adam Smith, Milton Friedman, and Karl Marx. It's a joke, of course. And Karl Marx happened to be in the water. Who jettisoned him into the water? Invisible hand of the market? That means that we have to understand that many processes which are covered by something decent is conscientious, say, actions of somebody. So a market economies is as a way of switching on mechanism, enhancing the competition for the benefit of attaining the national-wide objectives, were replaced with the, say, conscientious destruction of the fabric of the life of its humanistic approach. Let me cite a few examples. Tell me something. The decriminalization of swindling, is it a market reform, or is it say, destruction of the honest business, creative business, and the decriminalization of bribery when you simply can pay off? Is it the market economy, or is it conscientious criminalization of the society? Those are fundamental questions which we should ask ourselves. It is adopted and acknowledged that the former economic model has allegedly exhausted itself. But we're not speaking about the economic model. We're speaking about the model of formulating targets for the society. And we should acknowledge that the model of creating targets for society was a destructive one, a parasite one. So we were parasites on what we inherited from the past. Sell as much oil and gas and buy everything else. So, but I have been repeated many times that it would not be forever that they would be buying from us, the other world would be buying from us oil and gas. There would be reached a point in the development of the science and technology where other countries would not need our natural resources, we'll manage on our own. The current radical decline in the say oil prices, is it a catastrophe or is it a chance for us? Or is it an alarm? I think this is a chance. The life chose a different way, and which I thought it would. And the left is telling us, please think and correct your ways. In what way should we correct our way? We should be now looking towards a creative model of constructing the state, the economy, not as a goal in itself, but as a mechanism of provision of the targets which we formulate for ourselves. Thank you. Colleagues, before I give the floor to the Vlad Zhukovsky, a great Russian publicist. I have had many times the pleasure of listening to him. He points opinion in a variety of media. He's the youngest among the members of this panel. He may not be well aware how we used to live during the Soviet period of the Soviet Union, what was wrong, what was right at that point in time. That's why I would like to ask him a specific question. These results of the public opinion poll, which I quoted to you, which says that more than 50% of the population would like to get back to the planned economy, in an administrative planned economy, without any nuances. And directive planned economy. What do you think? Where would you be? In the 26%, or would you be with the 50%? Thank you for this question, but I still believe that what have been constructed in Russia is a chimera. It's not a market. It's a feudal society with the prevalence of, say, natural resources capital. So when we had to choose between one system, which was at the phase of degradation and destruction at 25 years ago, and another system, which is not a constructive alternative, I think we should create a third alternative rather than trying to choose between the two. So coming back to the question as to what I was going to tell you now, we had on the page 12, we have certain numbers which I would like to quote, and I would like to add two more pieces of information. Look at the microeconomic indices over a period of time. We see that the situation is much worse than is shown here. The destruction of the GDP would not be 18%, but 45%. Industrial production would go down not by 20%, but by 60%. The processing industry with high value added went down by the margin of 80%, by the fact the investment capital, capex went by 95%, by the 97%, where still they did not reach the before the pre-crisis level. Speaking about population, UNDP and UN recognized that there was an unprecedented say, destruction of the middle class, and the propagation of property was even higher. And if many of you were lived at that time, and you remember that the poverty was well below the 50%. I think 80% of the Russians were poor people, maybe even paupers. Criminality went up by the factor of 3. The level of disease was greater by 15-20 times, and the highest technology, high-tech, say, engineering industry, shipbuilding industry, aviation industry, all other high value-added industries, the decline was by the factor of 20 to 50 times, and we're still at the level of, in terms of production, at the level 1950 to 1960. So I'd like to switch on the presentation, and I would like to show a couple of slides associated with the 25th anniversary of the economic reforms, which are difficult to say reforms. So those were perhaps actions aiming to redistributing of the state-owned resources into their own hands. And Yuri Boldyrev wrote about that in his books at length, as a matter of fact. Well, I want to show you that this is the period of the 26 of 5 years of Russian reform. The green line, which the only one going is the final consumption of the Russians. So by the vector of the consumption and by the households, and we stand that in the situation of polarization of the society, the real level of life went by the fact that for 25, 1/3 of the population, while the 2/3 of the population now have even lower consumption level. The accumulation of the capex, and what is the driver of the say progress of the economy, went down by the 49%. So we're still twice as low as in the at that point of time. So those are the data related from the IMF. The added value in the industry is lower by the factor by the margin of 13 than in 1991. Those are, let's say, corporate investments. In terms of the 2015, the decline is more than 6%. Why the consumption went up? Due to growth of export and import. When the domestic production was going down, you can say increase consumption only by borrowing from abroad or borrowing foreign goods of investments on consumer goods into the countries. And we see that to the 60% growth of the import of and export into Russia. Let us look at the next diagram. From 1990, those were the changes of the key macroeconomic indices of the country. The final consumption of the state, which is non-effective, reduced over the 20 years by the factor of 20%, and taxes on the goods increased by 8%, by a factor of 8, and this also covers the results. What were the indices which were beneficiaries? So financial sector grew by the factor of 5, retail, real estate, clear taxes on all of us increased by 60%. Restaurants and the economy went only by 60%. So look at the top, you'll see the education, agriculture, food health. Your time is over. So that means that we have a lopsided economy where money is generated only by those who sit on the oil pipe or who are engaged in the, say, selling renewable gas or in finance system or connected with the hot foreign capital.
No.
Yes. I think it's important to once again look through these numbers of our economy, but I'd like to find out what are the true reasons, how objective and how subjective they are. And I would like to have a discussion on that. We have about 1 hour of time for our discussion, and my proposal is like following. We will ask questions to each other, and then I suggest that we will question our participants of the panel to question them so that we could initiate an agile discussion. And like to ask a question to Mr. Auzan. Alexander, concerning our common problems, social, cultural code of the nation has certain importance for economic development. And every time I quote the remarks which he made, referring to certain American scientists who said that Russians are very creative people, and they are very original in the way of their thinking. And if you want to create certain product with unique qualities, so perhaps the best mind will be the Russian mind, but when you want to make a series of products here, you'll find a serious problem. And now the primitive structure of our economy today, it's not only the problem of bad policy and exaggeration of the importance of self-regulation principles, which led to that privatization. And if this is a social and cultural code, a kind of a feature of our mentality, which is not changing, perhaps we'll have to think about some kind of new industrial policy. I'm supporting the mega projects, the high-speed railways, where it's difficult to compete with China in terms of consumer goods. It's hard to compete in machine building with Germans and Switzerland. But at the same time, we have spatial capital, not only intellectual capital. Perhaps we'll find our own way here. I'd like to quote, in 2011, we made a survey inviting the St. Petersburg researchers in the United States, in Germany, and in Russia. We studied the behavior of our compatriots, and some common conclusions were made. And out of that poll, the American manager said, if you want to make one unique thing, invite Russians. But if you want to make 10 similar things, order it somewhere else, but not in Russia. This is the topic is very diverse. For when Grzegorz Kolodko is talking about the link between institutions and values, and Mr. Nekipelov is talking about the motivation of subjects and institutions, is the call for the following. Institutions, they are supported by social and cultural platform, and we know very little about this. This is a theory of informal institutions, which is under development during the last 10 years. And there are some global measurements of that. And I could agree with Mr. Grinberg that if we want to build a strategy of development of our country, it is necessary to know the peculiarities, not only oil or coal, but what kind of people we have here. And this is not only professional characteristics or peculiarities of dialects in the vast territory of Russia. These are collectivism, individualism, creative activity, or standardized activity. These are the features to be studied. And 5 years ago, we offered to the president and to the government to enter into modernization stage, understanding these features of human capital, where we have, let's say, unique or small series production, this creative industry, aviation space, perhaps new directions of video design, And here are the vast opportunities. But if we want to enter those spheres where China or other countries are very successful, made by Japan or Germany, we have to shift aside through education or some other attempts for the values. It's not something given to us by God. This is developed by the society depending on the school, prison, and army, and non-formal institutions. They can be changed. We understand how fast they could change. It is changing in 40 years. In 20 years, you might get some visible results. In China, we should study a lot that they switched from short-term reforms to long-term strategy, and now I promote those attempts to develop a long-term strategy. Not all of us will see the end results. And you cannot do things which you cannot be accountable during this year. Let's say, what are the potentials? Along with the oil and gas, we have three tremendous potentials: space, people, and military and technical potential. It's a whole empire. They are used in a different manner. Is it possible to create a military superpower? We need to calculate. Can we make something out of our vast space, not just to spend this land for radioactive waste, but to develop Arctic zones, to create new routes for trade, and we need to develop the strategy and to find the point. These are the issues relevant not to short-sighted reforms, but with a long-term strategy. I believe our panelists will also make certain comments. For us, it's important to have a strategy and what strategy should be chosen. Now, I would like to ask Dominique Strauss-Kahn, speaking about the Western factors in Russia's development. Now we are in a very difficult stage of development and strongly depend on the rest of the world concerning the oil prices. And the sanctions, they're also painful in a certain way. Could you tell us, Mr. Strauss-Kahn, your vision of the future? Do you think we'll be able to overcome this stupid geopolitics? I remember the Paris Charter. We were preparing to live in a very harmonized world, preparing to help each other, and our admiration of natural competition advantages when they said, it's very nice, you have oil, gas, and fertilizers, go ahead with that, and the rest will be supplied to you by us. That was a kind of a mantra which we believed in, and today we see this world is not harmonized. It's a very dangerous world, and the question goes to you like this: what is your understanding of the situation? And a direct question: so to which extent the West is to blame to that, and what is our fault in finding ourselves in this situation?
I'm not going to elaborate a lot on sanctions. I've already said my word about that, including in Kiev. In a nutshell, I think that in this very sad history of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, it has been very badly handled by the Europeans and the Americans. And now the sanction in one way or another were, in my view, totally inappropriate, but have to come to an end. And I think that solution can be found in 2016, this year. because it's the interest of nobody. Not only it's not the interest of the Russian people, but not it's the interest of nobody to go on with this kind of policy. Now, on the more structural question of oil prices, you certainly hit by the low level of oil prices today. But the fact is that you didn't do enough to get out of the system where all the economy is finally financed by the resources. The consequence of it is when the commodity prices are high, it goes well. But it goes well in a wrong way, which means that the rest of the economy is not really in competition with the rest of the world, and so there's no need to increase productivity, there's no need to really renew the industrial structure, and when it happens that for some other reason the price of oil goes down, then you're just in a mess. So I think there's no other way than really developing in this country, as in many other economies, a multi-product economy, which is not the case today. In the same way, to develop medium-sized enterprises that you don't have here. You have huge enterprises. You don't have a lot of medium-sized enterprises who are really in competition with the world outside. You cannot work as if globalization didn't exist and the only link with the globalized world is to sell oil and gas. You have to import and sell a lot of other products. And to do that, you have to diversify this economy. It's easy to say, I know, not easy to do, but at least it has to be tried. To do this, a lot of reforms are still pending. Judiciary, property rights, other things like this. But there's no other way for a country like you, with his culture and the quality of the engineers you produce, there's no other way to have his share in the globalization. You cannot rely forever, and you won't rely forever, on only natural resources. The threat for the Russian economy is the middle income trap. You are now around $15,000 GDP per capita. The middle income trap is exactly that, which is to be unable to go further and to go up to 30,000, 40,000. The way to do that is obviously not to get rid of oil and gas economy. You have the blessing of having these resources, very good, but not to rely on that. And so it's dramatically urgent to develop. In many fields, you were talking about aeronautics or other fields like this. There are many other fields which goes from chemical to pharma to agribusiness. So there's a lot of fields where you have good characteristics. But if you're not able to develop this through a process of entrepreneurship, of creating medium-sized enterprises, of providing to the young people who are educated jobs in this kind of business, then the risk of being stuck in this middle-income trap is a high risk. So you're really at a crossroad. The grandeur of the Russian economy can totally be restored. I listened several times talking about China. Comparison with China is something different. It's a 1,300 million people country. It has nothing to do with Russia. You shouldn't compare to them. You should compare to Germany, to the European Union, to other countries here. And what is a big, big difference when you compare Russia to the country I just mentioned is the diversification of the economy. So you're looking for a strategy. The only one I'm able to understand clearly is the absolute dramatic need of diversifying the products you're producing.
Dominique, я хотел бы короткий все-таки.
Dominique, a very short comment. Of course, we understand that we have to diversify the economy, and we've been talking about this for a long time. We have a fairly shabby state of economy today and in the world, and it's hard to find the right niches which we could use. But even if we could find these niches, we have a dilemma. We are members of the WTO, and we would like to stick to these rules. Not all, of course, adhere to these rules. And Mr. Boldyrev said he wouldn't be against the idea of leaving WTO in order to properly structure in a correct manner our economy. So what is your viewpoint, or it is the way which will isolate us from the rest of the world? We've been talking about this for quite some time, but did very little in terms of import replacement, something we managed to do in poultry, in pork industry, but we strongly depend on the rest of the world. Or do we need state investments? We are in a recession, in a stage of stagnation, and it's hard to find the way out. What would be your advice in this situation? I would like Dominique to make a comment, and then Mr. Boldyrev will take over.
And so let me be blunt. You have nothing to win in leaving WTO. There's no institutional solution to the problem you have. It's just hiding behind your thumb to believe that just by changing some kind of membership, you will solve the problem. Problem is productivity. Problem is investment. And investment is not only public investment. On the contrary, it's private investment. Savings in these countries are much higher than the investment rate. And not only that, but the investment rate decreased during the last 5 or 6 years, not so much, from 22% from GDP to 20%, but still it decreased. That's the main problem. Had little to do with WTO. And when you were Cook in China a few minutes ago, saying they find the right way to do, what did they do? They joined WTO. I'm not meaning that joining WTO wasn't something fantastic for them. It's just neutral. That's not the point. The point is working on productivity. Productivity comes largely from competition. You have an economy who has little competition inside because it was protected by the fact that you were able to sell a lot of natural resources. You have to get out of this.
Спасибо. Юрий Юрьевич, прошу вашу реакцию, а потом...
Mr. Boldyrev, you have the floor, and I would like Grzegorz to take the floor. Dear comrades, I would like to remind you, first of all, that based on Mr. Konstantin Babkin's suggestion, our entire forum has grown out of what organization, from what kind of a small group, from the group of Stop WTO. That was the origin of our forum, as a matter of fact. And secondly, responding to the opinion of Dominique Strauss-Kahn, I would like to say the following. Indeed, it is not sufficient to do only one thing and then asking for immediate results. It's not sufficient to wash your hands. You could brush your teeth as well and do many other things when you do your morning exercise. In order for us to understand that not only WTO is something which we should say, be dealing with. We have a fundamental institutional issues. We are facing a fundamental institutional issues. Let me cite an example which happened 21 years ago. The first elected Council of Federation was against the draft law on the central bank, which created our system, not in a system of blood circulation system, but in a system of blood-sucking system, sucking juices from the real sector of the economy. The Council of Federation twice rejected the draft law, and you know, the say introduction of the adoption of the law was like a military operation. It's not only that we should give more freedom to medium business. We should change the whole system of the state governance in such a way so that it should become responsible for implementation of nationwide social and economic objectives. And the central bank is supposed to play one of the greatest, most important role, and it's arm of the government, of the state authority. I think it's sufficient for me to say so. I think that the central bank is a very important body in the system of governing the economy, and I think they've been doing a lot of mistakes recently, but I would not subscribe to Yuri Boldyrev opinion to the extent that it performs a blood-sucking function of the Russian economy. It's an overstatement, obvious. But we will ask Zhukovsky to cite numbers and data. Oh, we know all the numbers. We know all the numbers. I think that we should all understand that the central bank has its own challenges and they have made certain mistakes in terms of the currency exchange policy. I think that those mistakes are grave. And I think it has to do something with the current state of our economy, but it is wrongful to consider that it's an enemy institution. It's a mistake. I would like to give the floor to Grzegorz, Kolodko, and ask him to contribute to our discussion. I remember you wanted to say something. Do you want to advise us as to what life path we should take? But you said that we're not going to give advices, but also think. You see, there is a huge crowd of people here. What Chinese would do? They would definitely hold a conference in the Kremlin Palace of Congresses. Let me tell you something. I forgot to tell you that we respond very quickly to the proposals of the participants of the forum. In the auditorium B2 at the ground floor, near the cafe, they organized a direct broadcasting. This is the first response. And the second remark is that we are a forum which is not supported by the Kremlin. That's why we're in a position. We are, of course, a respectful opposition. I hope so, but we're an opposition, and I want to say that this forum is conducted on the funds provided by one of the co-organizers of this forum. So we should not even think, so at the moment at least, about the Kremlin Palace of Congresses. What Americans would do? They would sell tickets at the price of $25 per ticket. This is true. And what we do? We do that have guys. So people sit on the stairs and outside. So this is your market economy. It's not a market, halfway market, not a market, not a planned economy. I want to advise you to be the chairman of the organizing committee next time. Nekipelov told us recently, earlier, that there are institutions, there are values and the policies, but there are agents. And as you asked me, what is the difference between the Russian and Polish economy in terms of those 25 or 27? I would say that in Poland, there are only 2 years, not for 2 years, there used to be the worst period when it was not, the economy was not yet the new economy, but already was not an old economy. Whenever I come to Russia, and I come to Russia quite often, I believe that this situation has been going on, dragging on you for 25. It's not a planned economy, it's not a state economy, but it's not yet a market economy. What we should do, and what you need. The President Putin is not in the room. I don't see him. But I believe there are some people who would report to Putin as to what and they address Mr. Putin. Mr. Putin, the future of Russia depends on the economic development, long-term development, and I can tell you that you have potential for GDP growth, for the economic progress. In order to avail yourself of those opportunities within the next 25 years, the economic growth should be at the level of between 4 and 5%. And where is the weak point of the program? I would not say that's not in the capital or technologies. Definitely, we always need more capital, and the technology should be the most modern one. But when I look at the Russian economy, from Moscow to Kamchatka and Chukotka, and I have been to those places, I would like to tell that this is the soft elements of the economic continuation. That means organization, management, and policies. So suppose that Bill Gates were here, or let us suppose that Steve Jobs were here among us. He would not create a Microsoft. They were not able to create an iPhone. He would go to the United States to do that, because there they have those soft structure, and here you're lacking this soft structure. Why? Because we economists do not know, Mr. Putin. We economists know at the economic forum what should be done. But first of all, there should be a vision, not illusion, that there should be a long-term economic strategy of the state to be adopted, and then there should be a matching regional and entrepreneurship, development of implementation of that strategy. And in this sense, this is what is lacking in Russia. And we have been here for 1 year ago, 2 years ago. And we are talking that there is oil, but there is no progress. Why? Because there is oil. Sometimes there is no progress. There is no economic press or pressure on the political side. As in Poland, we managed to do something to a certain extent in terms of GDP. The Polish GDP is only slightly less than it used to be, but we had certain vision, we had a strategy, and we had economic and political leaders who were desirous to improve the competition, ability to compete of the economy, and to the level of the well-being of the people on the basis of the economic growth. That's something which I call new pragmatism, and not a corruptive, post-Soviet economy, post-socialist or post-communist neoliberalism, because it did not work, it doesn't work, and it won't work. What would work here is a new pragmatism. Thank you, Grzegorz. For you to know, the last two words pronounced by Grzegorz is not something new pragmatism. It's not a figure of speech. It's a theory of Grzegorz Kolodko, new pragmatism. Despite the fact that I do not subscribe to all of his opinions, that we have a state capitalism, but I think that state capitalism may be a good one and a bad one. We have not too good state capitalism, I call it this way, but on the formal grounds, we're the most, market-oriented economy global. We have 82% of the companies which are owned by individuals and not by the government, to much more, this extent much more than in the Poland. And the state quota, relations of state expenses to GDP is much less than in Poland, for you to know. I know that you are better than I am. But when you say in private hands, I would say that those private hands are oligarchs. And oligarch capitalism will not likely to work. And now I think Sergey Arbuzov also say, I would like him to say a couple of words in defense of the state bank, of central bank, because I believe he was one of the best chairman of the central bank in the post-Soviet area, and Ukraine scored great successes in combating inflation and providing stability of the currency exchange rate. Sergey, what can you tell us on this subject? Does our central bank I understand that you are a citizen of Ukraine and you may not be willing to meddle into our domestic affairs. Where do you believe the central bank, our central bank, made mistakes? Because you have had great experience in Ukraine. Thank you, Ruslan Semyonovich. I would like to definitely say something which I will be audacious enough to agree to certain statements made which were pronounced from the panel, because my life taught me through my professional involvement. I used to be a person responsible for central bank. The criticism without proposals is a useless exercise. When we get it today, we decided that agreed that we would not be criticizing too much, and we should be proposing. Well, the first plenary session is for criticism, the second plenary session is for proposal. But so far I see here only criticism. I see numbers which are great and very bright presentation. I agree with Mr. Kolodko about criticism. But I should suggest that if you make a critical statement, should immediately make a proposal, because criticism alone will not serve anything. So I do not want that we should be only, say, speaking in terms of criticism. And now let me propose something. In the first part of my presentation, I described the situation in Ukraine from 1991 to 2016, and I criticized that. But if a question is asked, what is the way out for Ukraine today, I would definitely be prepared to give a detailed response. There are plans, and Ukraine can afford to gain, great development without assistance from West and without assistance from Russia, only relying on its own resources to come out of this difficult situation. Once again, I call upon, if you want to criticize, please also propose something. As far as the central bank is concerned, I would like to say this is a very sophisticated and difficult tool of in any state. Should judge by the results. Based on our own experience, I would like to tell that we were going through a very difficult situation when we used to have situation when the crisis hit the population at large, and this is something which I would not wish to happen in Russia. When the population start to panic, that will be too bad, and if you don't have any mechanisms to compensate those. So far, the central bank is coping with its function, because the set of methods at disposal of the central bank is wide enough. Maybe it's a standard set. Perhaps they should devise some non-standard methods based on the Ukrainian experience when they introduced certain hedging instrument for the population to prevent panic. And I wish that the Central Bank of Russia should find its unique methods to counter those challenges which the Russian Federation is facing. I mean the sanctions, I mean vertical capital, hard capital, which is very dangerous for the countries with open economy. The hot capital can come and go quickly, and the situation is not far from being as good as some economists would like to paint it. So I propose to make proposals rather than only criticize. It was a remark made by a true diplomat, and I'm not as simple as you may think I am. I would like Alexander to expose your real position. Sergey, you intrigued the audience with the statement that there is a plan of leading the Europe out of the current dead end without Russian and IMF help. We economists, a month ago, we published results of the study which we conducted in the economic department of Moscow University, and the head of the study was Sergey Arbuzov and Klepich were part of those study belonging to the central bank. And we also looked at the Ukrainian economy as well in order to resurrect Ukraine, not in terms of the pre-war level of 1930, not only to the level of pre-crisis 2007 27 or 28, but to the level of the Soviet level, it would take about $80 billion in investments. Have you found $80 billion in investments? I can congratulate you. I simply have to respond. Definitely, you have the floor. We expect you. Yes, that's true what you say. And this, you say even less. To the real economy, we need at least $100 billion. And I can tell you that we do have such country inside Europe. They divide into part in domestic investment, population. Well, the population has about $100 billion from the Soviet period, which are not accounted for, and it is the task of the government to involve those funds into the economy without, lying to. And Ukraine has second factor. Ukraine has not even started the land reform, and this is another answer when the so the population should be taken care of, and the plan should be worked out, and then the plans were proposed to the parliament, but the new authorities, current authorities in Ukraine does not need it. So we should start this market of the land reforms and then invite investments. So quite officially tell you that the pre-Maidan authorities had contracts with the foreign investments with this collateral as land reform up to $50 billion. Yanukovych went to China. So, as I say again, the money is funds are investment facilities are available with population, and there are abilities to create additional money. So those great. Well, little long live Ukraine. And now, I think what we'll do, perhaps, maybe Alexander Dmitrievich would like to say, and then I would like to ask Kolodko. I would like to give 1 minute to each of the participants, and then I would request audience to come up with their proposals. You give me 2 minutes. I give you as a gift my minute to Grzegorz. What we need to do, we should look at the transformation within the framework of two largest processes going on in our life: globalization and technological revolution. And the question is, how are we using those processes to develop our countries, our economies? And I believe that Russia is a big country, being a big country, a rich country in terms of resources, has adopted a very bad way for economic development at the time of the globalization, of the technological revolution. So Russia is not using a good chance with globalization and technical revolution proposals as compared with small Poland, a large China, as compared with Brazil or other emerging markets. And this is important. You should ask this question: what should we be doing in the next 25 years? The globalization process will continue. So we have to allow for the economic growth and social economic development within the framework of globalization, because Russia should adopt and be a part of this process. You cannot avoid this.
Well, you are selling oil, gas, and weapons, and it's because of, yes, it's clear, sanctions. What are the influence of Russian sanctions on Polish apples? I don't understand. Polish apples are excellent apples. I wanted to say the following. I'm kind of confused when we say, well, now that's a good time when the oil prices went down, now we'll start proper work. I think the problem is different. The problem is we are using in a bad manner those earnings which were made when the prices were high. But for you to understand what kind of profits were made, and you can enter the official sites and you can summarize as of 2000 the assets concerning the payment balance in 16 years. It amounted to a little less than $1 trillion. More than $60 billion a year. These are not the funds which were lost, but these are the resources which most of them were not properly used for the missions for upgrading of economy. We created the so-called safety cushions, and today the Ministry of Finance is saying that this amount of money is not suffice because the situation is even worse than we thought. Dear colleagues, now I have a request to put the question to Mr. Strauss-Kahn because he is leaving us shortly, and let's take this opportunity and direct the questions to him. What about microphones? Do we have a no, we don't have a microphone. Okay, if you pay me a little fee, I will translate the question. During your life, you had two very important positions. Twice you've been a minister in the Fifth Republic, and you were also managing director in the IMF. I think you are a genius entrepreneur and practitioner, and during the time of your presence at these positions, there were two crises of 2007 and 2008, and the second crisis, 2008 and 2010. Did you manage to foresee such crises by your own vision? Yes or no?
I'm afraid you will say, are you the cause of the crisis? No, I didn't. And that's what I said at the beginning, that economic science is not so far good enough to solve all the problems. I must say, having the floor, that I'm a bit surprised by the tone of the discussions this morning, because everybody seems very pessimistic. Of course, the Russian economy is not in a very good shape, but you're facing two challenges: the sanctions, which really hurt, and the oil prices. So there's no surprise. I mean, there's a lot of things to do to change the way the economy is working, and I said my word before. But when you look at other oil exporters in South America, in Africa, elsewhere, they're in a worse shape than Russia because of the oil crisis. So don't underestimate the fact that your economy has problems also for outside, from problems coming from outside. And don't just throw the baby with the water of the bath. You have a lot of resources, not talking about natural resources, you have a lot of resources that can be used, and I'm a bit surprised that the tone is so pessimistic.
Yeah. Mr. Strauss-Kahn, I would like to ask you, do you believe in the existence of financial oligarchy as phenomena? Is it very difficult to overcome it or not? Or it's a virtual?
Well, I guess you're a better expert than I am in oligarchs. This kind of rich people having a lot of power on the economy do exist everywhere. probably a Russian way to do it, or Eastern Europe way to do it, because oligarchs and so-called oligarchs do exist not only in Russia but in many other countries. But I don't know if it's so different from name I could quote for my own country, where very strong people having a lot of resources, a lot of money, direct in one way or another huge enterprises, has also very strong power on the economy, and starting from this power on the economy, some influence on the political power. So I understand what you mean in this country by oligarch, but I'm not quite sure, maybe I don't know enough, but I'm not quite sure it's so different from what I see elsewhere.
But, а вообще у меня вопрос такой. Вот сегодня...
And the question is, today's inequality is very strong. In 2017, we will celebrate 100th anniversary of the Great October Revolution. Is it possible to overcome this growing inequality without revolutions?
And some may argue, is it possible to overcome this equality with a revolution? Because history doesn't show very well that. Look, my take of the 2008 crisis in the United States, which has afterwards appeared in the rest of the spillover in the rest of the world, is fundamentally inequality. If I put it very short, I'm sorry to make it so short, the American economy has developed for 20 years before with increasing gap between the richest and the middle class. And so the middle class, to maintain his level of standard of living, has to borrow. They borrow a lot, and they borrow that much that at the end of the day they were just unable to repay. And from that start all the structured financial products which created the crisis. So if you go to the root of the crisis in the United States and in the real estate market in the United States and then in the rest of the world comes basically from growing inequalities in the United States. So, revolution or not, 40 years ago I would have tell you, yes, revolution is the solution. I'm not quite sure today. But what I'm convinced of is that if market economy is not able to fight inequality, again within countries, United States, France, Russia, or among the countries in the world where inequality also is increasing, if we're not able to do that, then there will be some kind of, may not be a proletarian revolution, but some kind of riots, unrest. So the biggest mission today for people thinking to the future is how to have a market economy working not too badly, but at the same time avoid to have inequality increasing and, if possible, having inequality decreasing. And that, I think, is the main task for social thinker.
Спасибо большое. Это очень правильное замечание, на мой взгляд.
Yes, this is a very, very truthful remark. We have 10 minutes to follow. Can I ask a question? I've been waiting. A question. I am very much interested, Mr. Strauss-Kahn, what our today's power has to do to overcome these sanctions so that the young people could trust their government. And there are many students present here in this hall, and so that we do not leave abroad. And what do we have to do to overcome these first sanctions so that our young people believe in our government and stay in Russia? Could you also add, is it possible to do it without political regulation in the Donbas area? Or what needs to be done to overcome the spirit of sanctions?
And I don't want to interfere too much with Russian politics. The fact is that, as I told you before, I think the European, the Americans didn't manage well all this story, starting from the trade agreement between Ukraine and the European Union, which in my view could have been done very differently and discussed also with the Russian and avoid all this situation. Now the point is to get out of it. And my view is that you have seen what happened yesterday in Belgium. Terrorist attack. You've seen what happened a few months ago in Paris, even bigger. And if we all agree, Americans, Europeans, Russians, to say that there's a big threat for global stability in the Middle East, then we have to find a way to cooperate to fight against that. And the Europeans and the Americans have to choose their best enemy. If the best enemy is ISIS, it's not Russia. So if really we believe that there is a big threat, and I do believe this, in this kind of fundamentalism, Muslim fundamentalism, not Islam as a whole, not at all, but those people who are fundamentalists and trying to use religion as a political tool, if we believe there's a big threat there, then we have to focus on that altogether and put aside other problems that we may have. That's why I'm calling for the end of the sanction, as I told you before.
Спасибо. Я вам обещал. Дайте, пожалуйста.
Thank you very much. I promised to this guy, and please introduce yourself. Gadjaev. I'm Deputy Director of Science of one research institute. And having arrived here, we wanted to understand the general situation and wanted to get an answer. Our history of development during 25, 30, it's the method of trials and mistakes. And a lot of information has been accumulated for further movement. I wanted to understand the opinion of our economists and theoreticians. Is it possible to use some kind of hybrid drive for Russia? And Alexander Alexandrovich just said something needs to be used differently to move away from the consumption society. But what kind of a model? Maybe determinism, planning, or it's the absolutely liberal way of movement? I believe we are not respond to these questions right now because we have lots of roundtables and conferences dedicated to this specific topic and to the crisis of economic theory. Mr. Nigmatulin, give him the microphone, please. Try to imagine that you are the chief advisor on economy of Mr. Putin, and he listens to you. What will be 3 laws which will be imposed by his decree? So please, could you name 3 decrees of Mr. Putin? I would like to ask Mr. Nekipelov, then Kolodko, and then what will you tell to 3 basic decrees? Well, I don't think we are talking about just decrees. Today, we are in a stage when the current problems now are at the front line. And the key problem of today is that during a year and a half, we are living in a situation which does not correspond to normal economic activity. This is the highest volatility of the rate of exchange and very high interest rate of the central bank. I never hide my position, and perhaps it may normalize by itself, but we don't know when. So I thought that the key mission today in terms of normalizing the conditions for economic activity is related to impose limitations on capital expenses, which will reduce the interest rate. And after that, while the situation gets more normal, to pass over to solution of strategic issues. Next, please. I am the member of the Economic Council at the President's administration, and I'd like to tell you that now, allow me to address you, to say that by 3 decrees you can solve the problems of the country. It means that you are in the 90s. The laws and decrees are not settling anything. They're just creating waves on the water. But to find the way out of the crisis, this is the investment. If we're talking about the state money, I think we have to limit those capex expenses, and we have 31 trillion rubles among the population, and the state has only 14 trillion. So in this case, the accumulating pension system, the support of national investors, selling of bonds to the population, and switching from indirect taxation to direct taxation when the population could understand where this money is spent for. And the last one, we will overcome the time of crisis, but what will happen next? Because the major threat is to find ourselves in a long-term depression because we do not have any prospects of growth. That is, my approach is very, the first degree, to appoint Mr. Grinberg Prime Minister. Second, to ban all taxes on any money going to real economy sector. Nobody invented anything in the world but the whip and the candy. And mega projects, they have to be properly developed. There are several with very powerful multiplication effects. I'm not going to elaborate on that. Esteemed comrades, after the coup of 1993, supported by the West in the exchange for natural resources, it is understandable, but if we continue to develop, there will be a contradiction. Ukraine is a brotherhood state, but there was a coup, the situation of Crimea. It is impossible to return Crimea, not today, not ever, and we are doomed to exist in a very unfriendly situation from the most powerful states of the world. And here are the 3 decrees. Number 1, banning of all reforms in healthcare, scientific, and Academy of Science. Second, executive power. There shouldn't be any game between the government, responsible central bank, and the strict following of constitutional laws. In autumn, we will have to vote for the economic bloc, for social economic policy, which is responsible for the State Duma. If it is real Duma, a real parliament, so free elections of economic bloc, of economic government. Esteemed colleagues, I am trying to be as brief as possible. Of course, we will talk about the de-offshorization of capital and poverty. If there in the West, we need recommendations. So $2.5 trillion were were moved abroad, and this money needs to be returned to country, creating the points of growth inside the economy. A second approach to overcome disintegration of and build a bridge between the high-tech technology and highly profitable economic branches. We need strategic nationalizations at the same time to give more freedom to private business, to freeze all taxes on small and medium business, to ban all excise taxes for fuel and gas. Of course, we could discuss a lot these things, but as a whole, to avoid the policy of accumulated hard currency resources, but to develop this money for creative activity, to create the points of growth, creating jobs, and the tax maneuver that is for excessive profits, for export of capital, so that this money could be used to develop jobs and support small and medium business. The social function of small business is the priority here. That's the end. And Mr. Kolodko, are you still a Soviet citizen? We have a very wonderful singer, Valery Mеладзе, and the most popular song is Golden Fish. And there is a saying, I was a fool and I remained a fool. So let's see. I'm waiting for the president of Mr. Putin, and what are the first moves? First of all, you have to discontinue. You have not nominated your candidacy for the next presidential term. And to build the economy on the basis of knowledge, but not based on the oil and gas resources. Next. So your next nomination as Mr. Strauss-Kahn mentioned, it is necessary to make the profit of people who are not today wealthy so that they could increase their profit, so that there is no a gap between earnings of different layers of population. Because you cannot continue in the same manner. You can continue that for 2-3 years, but it will not last for long. And the third proposal, to initiate a real restructuring of the economy so that you have a greater sort of diversification of economy and to take part in continuing globalization. Very nice decree to impose the diversification of Russian economy. We are about to finish the first session, and I think it was effective. And in the end, I'd like to mention two things. Of course, I would say to Mr. Putin, but he knows about that. We had a chance to talk about this, of course. The imposure of the progressive taxation scale. And yesterday, I heard from the government official that we do not have to avoid the flat tax rate. This is our serious achievement, and we have to protect. And at the same time, he said all our colleagues, they envy us that we have a flat tax. And why they envy? Because they politically cannot do that. And I am dreaming about the time that politically we could do it and act in such a manner to discontinue this flat scale of taxes. And we all wish our motherland well-being. And I think I want to call upon you to be citizens. That means that, referring to Mr. Boldyrev, that we are going to face elections, and we have to be the citizens. We have a lot of democratic space, which is still left as our legacy, and you can express your civil responsibility. In the plane, I read a very interesting article, which would really be very good. In Australia, in a very democratic state, if the person doesn't go to elections, he has to pay 10 euros. 10 euros he has to pay. And if for the second time he misses the elections, there is a more serious responsibility. Even the criminal charge may be placed. And of course, I call upon you to very seriously study the political programs of different parties which will really compete. Thank you for your attention, and all these topics will be discussed deeper in the next coming days. Thank you very much.